No one. No apologies for absence. Oh, it's been a long day. Item 2, urgent items. There are 3 urgent updates this evening. One which provides a summary of the feedback received from Policy Advisory Overview and Scrutiny Committees on the agenda items, and 2 for item 24, Nature Recovery and Climate Change Action Funds. Is that agreed? Item 3, visiting members. Are there visiting members? I'm sure there are. Would you like to come and introduce yourself?
Brian Clark for item 28.
Rachel Rodwell. I can't think of the item I'm actually speaking on, but it's one of the motions. Okay.
Councillor Greenan to ask a question.
Councillor Cleater, items 1920 as it relates to paddle.
Councillor Wilkinson, item 21/22, whichever's more appropriate to speak on the fusion motion, Chair. Thank you.
Lovely. Okay, thank you. Yes. Right, item 4, disclosures by members and officers. Are there any disclosures by members and officers? No. Excellent. Item 5, disclosures of lobbying. Are there any disclosures of lobbying? I'm assuming all the cabinet are going to put their hands up after Councillor Forecast's emails. They sound like lobbying to me. Good. No, okay. So we'll note the entire cabinet's been lobbied on item. It'd be item 20, 19s and 20. Oh, yeah.
I have additionally been lobbied on item 28.
Okay, thank you. Any other lobbying? Oh, good. Item 6, to consider whether items should be taken in private. We do have some yellow papers, but I move that all items be taken in public unless any cabinet member wishes to refer to the information within the exempt appendices, in which case the cabinet will need to enter into a closed session having applied the public interest test. Is that agreed? Item 7, minutes of the meeting of the 23rd of July 2025. I move the minutes of that meeting be approved as a correct record and signed. Is that agreed? Presentation of petitions. There are none. Questions from local residents to the leader or individual member, cabinet member. There are none. Questions from members to the leader or individual cabinet member. There are 2 questions from members. First one is from Councillor Rodwell.
Thank you. We read that KCC's reform group proposed to rescind the 2019 KCC declaration of the climate emergency on Thursday, the 18th of September, tomorrow at 10 o'clock. The proposers of this motion describe KCC as a serious body, appealing apparently to clear evidence and some top scientists. They claim that the World Climate Declaration 2022 stated that there is no climate emergency. These claims all lack credibility. The World Climate Declaration clearly reaffirms that we are now in code red, with scientists stating that we are unequivocally facing a climate emergency. The scale of untold human suffering, already immense, is rapidly growing with the escalating number of climate-related disasters. The erroneous and misleading rhetoric of this motion threatens to derail the crucial work needed to prepare our county in developing the resilience to tackle the impacts of the climate emergency in our communities and infrastructure, which we are already experiencing and is in line with the scientific consensus. So, should the current KCC administration approve this retrograde step, what assurances can our Cabinet's Member for Climate Transition and Nature Recovery give that Maidstone Borough Council will continue to actively engage and work effectively with partners across the county, including KCC, in the face of such misinformation, to ensure we will continue to work towards the long-term future resilience, safeguarding all our communities as we face real climate change?
Thank you, Councillor Rodwell. That is to Councillor Summerskill.
Thank you, Councillor Rodwell. I'm similarly very puzzled by this motion, as only last week KCC agreed the Making Space for Nature concept, which detailed the dire straits of the condition of nature in Kent and indicated some of these were because of climate change. Our biodiversity and climate action plans are both approved by Cabinet, set out clear measurable actions that are already being delivered. So at the end of this month, we reached the midpoint of the financial year. Nearly half of this year's planned actions have been delivered, with the remainder underway, and this is a shared deliverable across all council directorates. Actions include nature recovery efforts, decarbonisation investments, climate resilience initiatives, and local sustainability support that reflect the urgency of the net zero and nature recovery challenge. I must note, I looked at the handful of scientific mentions in the KCC report. I note one was a television producer who's been forced to admit he's produced fake graphs and forged signatures with his climate change denying firms. Another was a former professor of meteorology who's received funding from organisations with fossil fuel interests for all his debunked theories. And Patrick Moore, not Sir Patrick Moore, as we may know, who's been erroneously cited as founding Greenpeace when he worked for them as an independent lobbyist for a couple of years and has been famously cited as stating that glyphosate is safe to drink. Strange bedfellows, I imagine, for KCC. To achieve and deliver on our commitments, we work closely with partners across Kent and others that aim to accelerate learnings between neighbouring authorities and climate groups through collaboration. So Maidstone Borough will continue to remain committed to addressing the climate emergency by engaging constructively with all our partners. Our aim is to ensure the borough is prepared for the impacts of climate change and our residents are represented through evidence-based actions and not political ones that deliver long-term solutions.
Thank you, Councillor Summerskill. Councillor Rodwell, do you have a supplementary question arising from etc., etc.?
So, regarding the current Tier 2 arrangement that we have with KCC, what then are the risks to the community and the public services should KCC no longer recognise that we are in a climate emergency and biodiversity collapse? What's going to happen? What are the risks?
Thank you. I can list some of the KCC organisations that we work with, particularly Solar Together, KCC Solar. We work with the Environment Group, having carbon literacy training for parish councillors and elsewhere. Plan B, which is looking at saving the pollinators, helping agriculture in place, and Levi funding on-street EV chargers. And a lot of these is central government funding, as is Making Space for Nature, which KCC is acting as the body who's passing things down to other bodies. So I'm particularly puzzled as to how we can work if they refuse to pass on central government funding to us. So the risk, we have a risk that some of the things that we're depending on central government funding will suddenly not come through, which I hope is not the case. And otherwise, it's some of the other other bodies that KCC also fund through their environment department, that if they cease to function, we will have trouble finding an alternative.
Thank you, Councillor Summerskill. Thank you, Councillor Rodwell. Yes, 2 pages of climate conspiracy theories going to the County Council tomorrow. Should be an interesting debate. Second question is from Councillor Greenan to the Cabinet Member for Community Cohesion and Safety. Councillor Greenan.
Thank you. Following recent protest by far-right groups, both here in Maidstone and in London, many residents feel a heightened sense of concern regarding unity and inclusivity within our community. These events are causing division and undermine the sense of belonging within the borough of Maidstone. In the past month, I have been told about a paramedic being verbally abused due to her skin tone, a lone Muslim woman in a car having a drink thrown at her and verbally abused, a woman originally from Bulgaria being stopped by a group of teenagers and told to go home, where Maidstone is her home, and a Polish man being subject to racist comments in his workplace. Please could the Cabinet Member for Community Cohesion and Safety outline what measures are currently in place and what further steps are being considered to ensure that community cohesion continues and that all residents feel safe, valued and included? Specifically, how is the Council working with local organisations, faith groups, law enforcement and other partners to promote understanding, prevent division and respond effectively to any incidents that may arise as a result of extremist activity?
Thank you, Councillor Green. And Councillor Nagy.
Thank you for that question, Councillor Greenham. I'm sorry to hear about the incidents you've mentioned in your question. I take great pride in Maidstone being a place where everyone feels welcome. I work hard on this when I was the Mayor of Maidstone, with a real focus involving as many people and community groups as I could work of the council. We undertake a lot of work to support communities and being residents together. This includes work on social isolation, poverty and housing insecurity, as well as responding to and addressing incidents affecting our residents' safety and feelings of safety, and working with Kent Police and other key partners. We are committed to ensuring that all communities, including those who are harder to reach, feel heard and included. I recognise there's a lot more that can be done, and I'm keen to build on the good work already happening to celebrate and amplify the diversity that exists in Maidstone, as the vet shown, like the River Festival, the VEJ Day and VE Day, where people came together to remember those things that happened those years ago, but people still came to those events and in Maidstone. We already work in partnership with others through our Inclusion Board, anchor institutions, the Voluntary and Community Sector Forum and Ward Cluster meetings, where things like this get brought up and police try and action them. I'm really proud that we have put in place this year a new communication and communities engagement strategy focused on building trust within our communities, a community resilient fund to support communities, and new citizens deliberation and engagement, with the first topic considered to be violence against women and girls, a topic that is important to me, to the council and me personally. And then finally, the announcement of Parkwood and Seneca as a trailblazer neighbourhood will provide sufficient funding and devolve decision-making powers to allow residents to work together with funding to improve their local area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Larkin. Councillor Green, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you. In your response, you referred to hard to reach communities, which is a phrase I personally cannot stand. As part of our new strategy, will we turn that on its head and look at hard to access services rather than hard to reach communities?
Thank you. That is something I'm working on with Martin Jens and his department, because we know these communities there, but we don't often see them at meetings. And that will be where we take notice of who's not attending, and we'll try and get in touch with them through various ways, whichever way we can, to let them know what the council's doing and if they want to have a voice, they're quite welcome to come to meetings that we hold. And that's something we're trying to do, to invite these people. We know where these communities are in Maidstone, but we know they don't often attend things where their voice can be heard. So that's something we're hoping to change very soon. It's just a way how to tackle it without upsetting anyone, so they can come and voice their opinions.
Thank you, Councillor Largy. Just also for the record, I have written to the leader of Kent County Council requesting some action on the flags and the graffiti on the roads, and also flagging concerns about 5 of her Reform councillors, county councillors, joining those far-right protests the other week. I have yet to receive a reply, strangely enough. Thank you. Right, item 11, matters referred to the Cabinet by another committee. There are none. Item 12 is items arising from overview and scrutiny. There are none. 13 is matters referred to the Cabinet by another committee. There are none. 14, matters relating to a serious service failure or nuisance. There are none. 15 is receipt of written representations from members of the council. There are none. Item 16 is the Cabinet forward plan. Do members have any comments on the forward plan? I think I heard noted. Is it noted? Definitely noted. Right. Change to the business order. Before we discuss the substantive agenda items, I'd like to inform everyone that I intend to consider the council references alongside the relevant reports. This means 17 and 18 together, then 19 and 20, and then 21 and 22. 17, reference from the council, the petition to create a memorial to the Maidstone witches who were wrongly persecuted, convicted and executed. Okay. So doesn't actually go to a specific cabinet member, so I'll introduce it very briefly. I think most people were at the noted. Thank you. Most people were at the full council meeting. I wasn't. We have a request for a memorial to the 6 witches that were wrongly tried, convicted and hanged in Maidstone. I believe that the trial itself was bigger than the Pendle witches trial, and apparently the biggest trial of its type. So I'm going to throw this open unless Mrs. Woodhouse has anything to add. I'll have.
Thank you. Yes, just to highlight that obviously this petition was put forward by Councillor Keeley, and we have spoken to her since the publication of the report to ask for her views in terms of next steps and support. So the proposal is that we include this in our heritage open spaces project, so we look at it as putting in a sculpture or memorial as befits. We have had some feedback that this should be specific to the 6 as referenced in the petition, and actually it might be quite nice to move it into a more central location in the town centre. So to ensure we capture people's views and the passion and the conviction that was put forward at full council, we'd like to involve councillors in the project to ensure we get it right and in the right place and as they wish. And one of the options she was citing was the one that's mentioned in the report, like Faversham have got, where they've got a flagstone in their town square. So we will look at lots of different options, talk to councillors, and then bring something forward if that option goes forward.
Thank you. Councillor Harwood, then Councillor English.
Thank you, Chair. I think as one of the representatives of Hemsden Heath, I ought to chip in. I do have some kind of points I want to raise around this. I think talking to members of the public, it is remarkable to somebody who's kind of grown up in the area how little acknowledgement and understanding there is of the terrible events that took place at Penston Heath over more than 1,000 years. When I've been talking to residents and locals, they've been talking about the 6 individuals who were judicially murdered in the July 1652, and they think that was it. It's 6 people, but actually, as I say, many thousands of people died at Penston Heath for everything from political sedition to petty treason to being a gypsy, the law, to petty theft, to being accused of burning ricks when they didn't, and so on. So, between King Wichred's time in the 7th century, and interestingly, King Wichred, he codified the first laws against witchcraft in an attempt to suppress the indigenous religions. So from the late 600s right through to 1830, people were being killed at Penston Heath. And it wasn't, believe me, it wasn't just hanging people. And growing up in that area, when the Chiltern Hundreds roundabout was built, charred bones were dug up and disposed of. When they were building the prison, and they used sand from Gallows Hill, again, it was just full of the remains of people left there. Even as recently as the M20 extension widening, again, works had to stop because of the number of human bodies they found. So this was industrial scale killing, very close to where we are today, over many, many years. And I just do think that if we do, and I think it's right that we use developer contributions towards public art or other cash that we bring in to mark the heritage, albeit a heritage of cruelty. And I think that, yes, in terms of the witch trial being quite high profile, I think it is important that we do mark it. But I think there should be also within any public art or with any installation, just an acknowledgement of what happened at Penston Heath over such a long period and the large number of people who died. So that was one thing. And the other thing that I'm struck by is we heard from the earlier motions that we're living in a time where once again we're seeing intolerance, we're seeing scapegoating, we're seeing kind of metaphorical witch hunts on social media instead of through pamphlets. And it's taking us to a very dark place. And I do think that because of our wretched past, basically, with the fact that Penston Heath is in our borough, we should perhaps write to the Home Secretary and ask for a piece of legislation along the lines of the Witchcraft Convictions Pardons Act in Scotland, so that there is drawing a line under it to see, that in the same way that other religious persecutions have had apologies and so on, that has not occurred in England over the witchcraft persecutions. So I think we as a cabinet could do that, and perhaps ask you as a leader of council to write to the Home Secretary, just asking for a line to be drawn under this issue. And then I think finally, it just comes back to that point around, if we are going to have a memorial, it needs to be of a quality, particularly if it is the town centre, that reflects the importance in terms of heritage and history, and it cannot be something which is forgotten about very quickly. And to do that, it may take time. We may need to accumulate public art contributions and so on in some way, but I think it's really important that our very significant history is properly marked, and I think we've already done that in everything from the Captain Louis Nolan memorial through to the Mantellisaurus outside the station. But I think we need to get it right. So I don't think we just go ahead quickly because we got a small amount of money, but we actually get a really a design that is going to be food for thought and make people reflect on the cruelty of the human race.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood. I'm happy to second that suggestion around the letter as an amendment to, I'm assuming, option 1 would be the one we're heading for. But Councillor English.
Option 1 is fine because it gives us it gives us flexibility, and I think I have already, because I sort of assumed, perhaps rashly, that being the cabinet member responsible for the public realm, that it would eventually fall in my court. So I have had some very preliminary discussions with John Edwards and others, but no decision has been made, just preliminary discussions about what might be feasible. But I think it's perfectly reasonable to take a considered view and do a project that is truly worthy of being done. Councillor Harwood has mentioned the Nolan Memorial. Well, that took a long time to do, but it has certainly turned out to be a stunningly successful piece of artwork and historical remembrance, albeit of a tragedy, and has attracted many visitors over the years since it's been there. So I think we've got time to get this right. We've also got time possibly to actually address this in a number of ways, because there are a number of projects going on in and around Pennenden Heath that might also reference this. So we might be able to, and also some work going on in the museum. So we might have some multi-stranded approaches to this, which would be good as well. So I'm quite happy to support option 1 because it gives us the flexibility to actually do this properly, and I wouldn't want to rush it and do a half job, because I actually think this is historically very important, not just for the 6 people who were totally unjustly murdered, is the right term, but for the wider number of people who were affected. And I think in an era when the President of the United States can stand up and say domestic violence is not a crime, as he did 2 days ago, there is an issue about how responsible people in public office respond to that sort of blatant misogyny, sexism, and support for criminality.
Thank you, Councillor English. Yes, there is a very clear link with violence against women and girls that you've made. Thank you for the support for both option 1 and the amendments. I agree, option 1 does give us that flexibility. I'd also quite like, in terms of the working group that's working on this, to make sure that Councillor Keeley is engaged with that. Are there any other comments? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. We are content to note the cross-cutting nature of this item across portfolios along this table. This is welcome. It vindicates the approach of this council. I welcome the rich comments recorded from page 21 onwards in our papers, a very wide range of considerations where words are used as carefully as we can manage. I welcome the grounding of the whole item in a commitment to historical reflection, as noted on page 22. This is to be welcomed. I must note, Mr. Chairman, in passing, that some of the remarks made at the time in the debate and even this evening of the use of nouns and descriptions haven't entirely accurately summed up the intent of the original movers or of some of the people who have reflected. For example, when the statement, the Maidstone witches, is put in quotation marks, I'm not sure that entirely conveys the richness of meaning and careful consideration that is intended. I'm not making a complaint. I'm simply pointing out that we need to be careful about how the matter is communicated in the rich thought that we're committing ourselves to going forwards. That's really important. The way that people thought in the past and the way language was used in the past isn't the same as the way we do so today. And that is interesting, that is useful, that is helpful. It gives us a mirror to help us reflect on ourselves and our present culture for all of the reasons that Councillor Harwood, Councillor English and others have responded to. So I very much welcome the inclusion of this consideration of a memorial with many councillors under the heritage and culture work of this council, and thank everybody who's contributed thoughtfully and considerately towards it.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Your comments about language are well made. Any other comments from members? Okay, in that case, we've got a proposal for option 1 on it's actually item 18 with the additional request to write to the Home Secretary. Is that agreed? Agreed, thank you. Okay, item 19. This is the reference from council from council on the motion to support padel provision at Lockmeadow, and item 20, which is the officer report. I note that Councillor Forecast was not able to make it this evening, which is a little frustrating. I don't think I need to introduce the paper particularly, other than to say that the concept was discussed at informal cabinet. We felt that Lockmeadow was not the suitable place for padel courts, particularly Coronation Square, which is an event space which would be lost under the suggested provision. Adding to that, the impact on noise within the local area. There have been significant reports of noise complaints from these courts. It is surrounded by residential, obviously going to have a wedding venue fairly close as well, and then there's the impact on wildlife particularly from the lights. So before I open it out to discussion from members, I think Councillor Cleater, you indicated to speak on this one, if I remember rightly. Yes, you did. Good. So I'll go to the visiting member first.
Thank you. I'm sure we've all received the emails from Councillor Forecast, and I commend him for wanting to bring more sport to Maidstone. I probably haven't looked into padel. There seems to be quite an aggressive marketing and application strategy going on up and down the country at the moment. They also came into conflict with the Lawn Tennis Association over Lee Valley in London, where they wanted to lose tennis courts. So what I would say is nobody is against padel anywhere, but they don't get to tell us where we can have it. There are plenty of areas within the borough that would be more suitable to hold that. We need infrastructure in Shetway and Parkwood, and I'm sure as part of the Trailblazer, where we want to get facilities for people to use, that I don't see there be any objections about putting such a needed health related sport in the area. However, I'm not a ward member for Fant, and neither is Councillor Forecast. I've not heard of any support from ward members, or I could be wrong, I may have missed those emails, but I would really urge to have a conversation with Paddle to say no one is against this, but not in Lochmeadow. It's not appropriate. And actually, I think people will not be using public transport to get there. They will be driving there from quite a long distance around. So I would urge Cabinet on balance to say, yes, please have conversations with us. Please look, and we will support you elsewhere. But Lochmeadow, which is already has traffic problems, and as you've laid out, the noise and the lights will cause significant disruption for people living there. So I would urge Cabinet to enter into constructive conversation with the organisation, but I don't believe, as do others of my colleagues, that Lochmeadow is the right place for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cleater. Councillor English, just before Councillor Thompson, should you have introduced that and this motion, this piece? Because I've got a note saying it is actually your portfolio. So I'm going to, oops, oops, sorry, I've got to move to Councillor Thompson.
We are again squabbling amongst friends over overlapping portfolio responsibilities, and this is all to the good. I welcome the engagement of not just Councillor Forecast, but one or two others who have engaged energetically in pushing forward this proposition, and councillors are right to do so. And I will make the point again this evening in another item. It is my portfolio responsibility and the commitment of this council to look for health in all our policies, a commitment to growing sport and leisure, considering community neighbourhood impact, indeed economic development, and our part in promoting all of these things. And with apologies to a story in a galaxy far, far away, I will simply sum up by what we can see in the papers, amounting to this is not the site for paddle that we are looking for. Thank you, Mr.
Councillor English.
Whilst the possible site is actually in Fantward, it's actually some distance to properties in Hart Street from the site. In terms of the noise impact would be greatest if it went ahead on the College Road almshouses, and as the name suggests, these are people of 55 years and above, and probably would be almost certainly would be impacted more severely than the general population by such noise. We did look, and it is important to note this, we did look very carefully to actually see if there was a part of the Lochmeadow site, not Coronation Square, that would actually be suitable for this, only to run across some quite substantial objections from our own planning officers. So I think it is fair to say that needs to be put out there. I do believe that paddle does have a future and could offer something to Maidstone. I do think we have to be careful that it doesn't undermine lawn tennis, because that has been the effect in some parts of the country, that is cannibalised existing sporting provision. I want to see additional sporting provision, not one sport cannibalising the provision for another sport. I don't think that's a healthy situation. So we should, as a cabinet, try and facilitate bringing this forward, but although in the locations where such a sport could thrive without constant complaints, noise investigations, planning issues, environmental health issues, which have cropped up in some of the venues that have inappropriately been developed in other parts of the country. So we want to avoid that, so that any potential sites that brought forward are successful and contribute to the borough of Maidstone, and both in sporting provision and in terms of not creating additional problems like noise and traffic through that unfortunate location.
Thank you. And it's Okay, it's worth noting in the papers that there's a suggestion that Poplar Park have become a site. It would be interesting to, and I welcome Councillor Cleater's suggestion that Shepway would be a good place, and it'd be interesting to understand Councillor Forecast's position on Poplar Park, given it's in his ward. I saw Councillor Wells first, and then Councillor Summerskill, only because Councillor Wells is closer and light travels quicker that way.
Just briefly on another reason that Lock Meadow site may not be the most suitable is that if we ever do have plans to improve access and improve enjoyment of our biggest natural asset, the river running through Maidstone, the last thing we want is people trying to have a peaceful walk along the riverbank, confronted with the noise and the lights and the pollution from noise and light from the paddle courts. I think that we need to be aware of what we could potentially do with that site, as well as what's there now.
Thank you. Councillor Summerskill.
Yes, thank you. Noting the motion originally mentions that planning applications will be judged independently by planning committee based on planning merits in accordance with the MPPF. It struck me when we were debating this in 16th of July in council that a statement from my fellow ward member said that it was a successful venue in Marden for paddle and noise wasn't even considered, which puzzled me as a parish councillor at the time. I thought it was, so I thought I would just check back through the planning records and to correct the statement made. I looked back and a noise impact assessment was produced for the appeal, was successful appeal on the Marden paddle site, and the ward councillor in Marden at the time called the application by 21503412 into planning committee because concerns had been raised by me by a number of nearby residents regarding noise issues and light spill issues. So that seemed to have been conveniently forgotten. Having said that, we've now got paddle coming into Yalding as well, so we're obviously well ahead in the rural wards in providing this provision.
Thank you, Councillor Summerskill. Obviously, your ward is the place to go if you want to play paddle. Any other comments? Councillor Nagy.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I wasn't going to say anything, but I've got a comment on his email from this afternoon. He's actually saying that obviously there's so many events at Lock Meadow and they've lost money and stuff like that. But if only he could go back to, it was his own party that instigated this square so people in Maidstone could have events there. That was the whole purpose of it. And I think the first one we did properly was the River Festival. And if it wasn't there, we couldn't have a River Festival by the river because obviously everything's being built on or we haven't got access to it. And I just think this is just like it's his personal thing to push this through somehow. And most of these things, you don't have to go to planning for most of it because most of it's common sense. In my view, and the opportunity there for people to have some sort of event in the centre of Maidstone at Lock Meadow is the only opportunity that people have where we can put something on roughly in the town centre. And I think the River Festival has proved that many times. If you have the right thing in the Lock Meadow, it will attract. And of course, that's a free event to most people. Obviously, we had the fantastic backing of Maidstone Borough Council this year, but usually it doesn't cost the council anything. If there is a bit of a cost, we usually cover that. And I think this is where he's lost the plot. There is lots of places should have been considered. It shouldn't just be one. Other places should have been considered when this was coming up, and if this was the first preference, but maybe 2 or 3 other places could have been mentioned. So when it did come to the cabinet, we could have looked at these options. But as far as I know, I think this is just the option being pushed forward. And to bring the cost into it, he's a bit lost the plot there. It's not about Maidstone Borough Council making that money out of that area. It's about putting something on for the local community. If the local community want to do it, there is a venue there. And if that's gone, there won't be much left by the river, and the River Festival could suffer, and anything else that goes on in that area. And I just think he's just missing it really, and to put down it's losing money. Well, it wasn't there to make money. It was there for the local people to put something on in their local community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nagy. Yes, you make a good point about the loss of, I think it's probably the only hard-standing event space we have in the town centre. That would be a crying shame. And I do fully endorse your point about planning. I mean, it isn't a planning matter because this is a decision as to what we want to do with our space, first and foremost, and relating back to the lobbying aspects which you referred to and Councillor Cleat has referred to. The lobbying is quite intense, particularly from the company. I've had emails on that, and even from the local MP who Councillor Forecast I think works for. So yes, lots of lobbying, which feels a little bit strange. But yes, you were right. We are, as the papers say, looking at other spaces for provision of the support. I can't see anyone else indicating. Option 2 is the preferred option. Is that right? Yeah. Which I think I probably proposed at the start, but if I didn't, I'm proposing it now, and I think Councillor Thompson seconded it. So are we agreed with option 2? Excellent, thank you. Sorry? Hadn't. I have now anyway. And we've agreed it. Thank you. Right, item 21 and 22. This is the reference from Council on the notice of motion for Fusion. There's too many IONs in there. Fusion Health Living Centre, and obviously the report as well, item 22. And this time, Councillor Thompson, hopefully, is going to introduce it.
Thank you, Chair. I'm delighted to see these papers in front of us this evening, and I'm moved to reflect that when I was sitting on the other side of the council in my first year, the then leader pointed out that certain aspects of that administration's programme were so important they were not given priority to any one cabinet member, but were devolved to the responsibility of the entire council. I'm talking about climate change and such related items you may remember. I'm not sure that we did a particularly good job in that year of demonstrating buy-in from councillors and the widespread of efforts, but it is very heartening to see that this motion was brought forward by councillors without question as to which political party it came from. Our commitment to health in all policies, our commitment to community impacts of effective joined up health measures is much welcomed. Precisely what the reasons were as to why £12,000 wasn't allocated in previous budgets is beyond my business to need to know, but it's clearly a very positive mood. And for all of the reasons that are rehearsed over the lengthy papers showing all of the excellent work that the Fusion Centre did and does and will continue to do, and the vital part that has in this community, these things are always to be welcomed. And as I say, the point that I wanted to make was that all the councillors in this council have positive parts to play in this, and I would welcome more of it in the future. I move the motion, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Mrs. Woodhouse, did you have anything you wanted to add as you're named on them? Okay, and Councillor Wilkinson, I think your visiting member wanted to speak on this.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, it sounds like I'm kicking an open door anyway, but obviously nobody in this room doubts the value of Fusion, not just to Parkwood, but to the wider borough. It's delivering health, youth and community services that save public money in the long run. And I've talked before about my view that covering the rent would be a relatively modest cost to the Borough Council, but a huge relief to Fusion. And that's why I'm glad the motion came forward. Option 2 on the paper, which is a one-off payment this year, responds to Fusion's immediate ask and would offer some short-term relief. But option 3 gives the opportunity to do this properly, to sit down with Fusion, understand its needs, build a structured arrangement through the normal budget setting process That way we can ensure fairness with other community partners, get clear outcomes for residents and back Fusion in a way that's fair, sustainable and properly built into the budget. So I'd urge Cabinet members to approve the recommendation per the order paper. Thank you.
Councillor Wilkinson. I saw Councillor Wales, then Councillor Nagy were pipped at the post. Councillor Wales is on fire today with his indications. Over to you.
I'm very happy to support this, but I think it should be considered in the wider scheme of funding voluntary sector organisations and social provision, because if we just fund this one because it's a good idea and does a good job, and this one because it does a good job and it's a good idea, I think we need to be more careful about what limited resources we have, making the best effect that they can possibly have by joining up services. I mean, they run a food bank, but we also already have food bank provision. And it's a bit like the discussion we're having with the night shelters, the fact that we've got so many of them doing similar things and overlapping or not overlapping, and where the gaps are and things. So I'd like a more coherent approach to how these things are funded, and so that we can make sure that we offer a joined up service to residents, particularly in that area. And again, it's possibly another thing that we could steer residents to spending some of the Trailblazer funding on in that area in particular.
Thank you, Councillor Nagy, and then Councillor English.
Yeah, I just want to say, it does seem to be, where would we stop? Because there's a lot of good charities out there doing a lot of work, but Fusion, I know, has been going for many years, probably the first one to be in Maidstone of that size, I think, and they've managed to keep going over the years. And my feeling is, as something that's been that successful, and it does help a hell of a lot of people, and does little things and always trying to do better. And I think that Councillor as well is right. We should be looking at that to see if we can keep other food banks, or look at it when people need help. We got something we might be able to help them with. It's just a case of that's a fund there. But at this moment in time, if these sort of organisations don't exist, a lot of people would just miss it, because it's a lot of they mainly go out during the day, something like that, or in the evening if there's an event on. But obviously, in a perfect way, we'd like to have a few more all over. But Fusion is the one that's been going for so long, and I wouldn't like to see it not be there. And I think contribution, I don't know if it's going to be a one-off or not a regular thing, or I got that bit yet. But I think this 12,000 would help them. And in the meantime, they're always raising funds, as most of our food banks are, mainly donations and what they raise themselves. So I think this contribution this time, I would agree with it, and see how Fusion come on, because they are one of our biggest and best ones in the borough, and set the standard in my view. And those sort of things that if we could help with, do help vulnerable people in our borough. And I would like to have a look at it again, maybe in the future, and as soon as possible get together and see what we could do in this time where everything is particularly unpredictable. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor English.
There is no doubt that Fusion has and is doing a valuable piece of work, several pieces of work, I suppose, in overlapping ways. I have no problem with giving them support. I do have to say that as a more general issue, I think Councillor Wales is right, and we do actually need to look at, more widely at our relation with the voluntary sector, particularly those organisations we have an SLA with, and see what we can do in those areas, because those organisations do, and Fusion do actually, well, if they weren't there, the council would end up having to shoulder more responsibilities than we currently do. So I think it's an issue we do need to look at in the round, but that shouldn't prevent us assisting Fusion through the budgetary process in the next year as a priority, because I think it is a priority, and we must be aware that a significant number of people in Maidstone are very well off, but there is also a not insignificant portion of Maidstone's residents who are anything but well off.
Thank you. You make some good points about the impacts on other services and wider public sector as well, from that are the impacts that are prevented through the good work that Fusion does. I think the proposal from in per the papers in 4.1 that Councillor Thompson moved is to consider it within that wider budget discussion. So I can't see anyone else indicating. I'm happy to second that. I don't think I heard a seconder, so I'll second it if you like, Stephen. Are we happy to agree that? Excellent. Good. Item 23, I think, is next. Councillor Harwood, this is the Headcorn Neighbourhood Plan.
Right. Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is essentially procedural. There's a report, a very short report on 58 with a recommendation on page 59, and it just asks us to note the outcome of the referendum on the 8th of July, it's not 2021, is it? It's 2025. So that needs amending. And I think it is worth mentioning that of those who turned out to vote, 98.8% of those did accede to agreeing the neighbourhood plan, and I therefore move that the council be recommended to make the Headcorn neighbourhood plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor English, for seconding that. I mean, it does sound like a close result. Do we need a recount or anything? Is that a
It's almost a North Korean result.
Excellent. I can't see anyone indicating, as you say, it's procedural mostly. Are we happy with that recommendation? Excellent, good. Item 24 then is the Nature Recovery and Climate Change Action Funds. Councillor Summersgill, this is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. If we recall, the Biodiversity and Climate Change Action Plans were approved by Cabinet in June 2025, and within that action plan there was a budget for both a Nature Recovery Fund and a Climate Action Fund, which together totaled £500,000. Those budgets were allocated and approved within the medium-term financial strategy back in February. We've been processing how to deal with the funds and distributing them, and a new grants policy was approved by Cabinet in July 2025 for managing small, medium and large grants, which will apply to this as well as other purposes. So we drafted the prospectus for two separate funds, including the detail of the scoring matrix, eligibility criteria and the awarding of grants. And as part of the bidding, applicants must demonstrate how ongoing maintenance of the project will be delivered. This was discussed at PAC in quite some detail. There have been some changes since PAC in order to spend the funds over a 3-year period rather than a 4-year, and to make sure that staged payments were being used. So larger grants are now being quantified as those over 25,000. So the objectives of the two funds, I won't go into detail really about them, but the larger one is the Nature Recovery Fund, where we're expecting grants to be in the 10,000 to 50,000 range. And the Climate Action Fund, if 12,000, is liable to be in small grants from £1,000 to £3,000. So the options we're putting forward is to approve the prospectuses as appendicized, or editing to one or both of them, and put that forward to you.
Thank you, Councillor Summersgill. Shelley, do you have anything you wanted to add? Or no, I'm happy to second that. Councillor Harwood.
Thank you, Chair. As colleagues will be aware, I have a passion for natural history and the natural world, And I don't think it's an exaggeration to state that nature is undergoing a catastrophic decline, even on sites where there is no visible impact from development or other changes. Both biomass, the number of organisms, and the diversity of organisms is declining at an ever increasing rate. And Maidstone Borough, because of its geology and its location, is particularly rich in biodiversity because we've got a bit of everything. We've got chalk downland, we've got the acid sands on the green sand ridge, we've got the clay on the low weald, and we've got the alluvial soils around in the river valleys. But because we're in the southeast and we are subject to a continental climate, we're also being hit with some of the most extreme impacts in a UK context from climate change. And that is, I think, with the pesticides and other issues and other problems that are causing some real impacts for biodiversity. I think it's those climate change impacts which are having an impact, because essentially periods of long dry periods and heat and so on, our wildlife is just not adapted to it. So it all comes back to earlier discussions. However, I think in relation to this report, again, I was a prime mover and very keen that we did put a decent funding into assisting nature recovery. And I am absolutely adamant whether we do that in the most efficient way, and that those projects that we support really do deliver for nature. So I'll be kind of watching this like a hawk to make sure that those projects that are going through are genuine projects for nature. And that brings me on to the point that I really do need to kind of clarify. In terms of Maidstone Borough Council, the land that we own is perhaps the land where we have the greatest ability to influence its management, its maintenance going forward, and to re-wet the landscape and to rewild the landscape and all the things we need to do if we're going to hang on to our wildlife. And I'm a little bit concerned that the wording as it currently states within the prospectus, it does limit our ability to progress projects on Maidstone Borough Council's land. I mean, for example, within the Nature Recovery Fund bidding prospectus, on the fourth page of that prospectus, which is page 76 of your papers, it states that the Nature Recovery Fund is available for organisations, charitable, not-for-profit or community-based, and joint projects on Maidstone Borough Council land. But that in terms of that joint element on our land, in many parts of the borough, particularly the unparished, more urban areas like Moat Park and Watman Park and Penzance Heath and so on, Maidstone Borough Council is the landowner and Maidstone Borough Council is the land manager. So therefore there is no third party to undertake a joint project with. So my preference would be that first line on who can apply, we drop the joint projects, and that simply says the Nature Recovery Fund is available for organisations and projects on Maidstone Borough Council land. That just seems to overcome the problem that that we would need to to go with a third party that does not exist. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Harwood. I'm just going to go to Mr. Cornell for a response on that specific point, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, picking up on Councillor Harwood's point, I think quite simply the grant schemes proposed are as well as rather than instead of the MBC activities. So we've got an extensive programme of projects that are being delivered through different budget streams. And I think they've all been shared with yourselves today. So that's the key point. I think it's long been an ambition for the cabinet to run a grants programme for these activities. Personally, if you felt the balance of what's being proposed wasn't right and you wanted to top slice some of the 500,000 and use it for further MBC projects, that's of course fine, but you know, there does become a sort of a capacity issue because we've got a myriad of different schemes that the council is delivering of this ilk. So personally, I think what's proposed is the right way forward. It's the right balance between in-house provision and using key and external partners to deliver schemes. But of course, we can make a different decision this evening, but the officer view is 500k for grants is the right figure, and it's on top of the activities and the projects that MBC is funding through different activities and different budgets. So broadly, that's the headline position.
Thank you. I'm just going to, I know Tony, you want to come back in. Councillor Summersgill, do you want to respond to Tony's points?
Yes, just to clarify, there's an urgent update which changed the wording of that second line, not materially in respect, but if we are going to get the wording correct, we need to use what's on the urgent update, which says the fund is available for organisations, charitable, not-for-profit or community-based, for projects within Maidstone Borough or joint projects on Maidstone Borough Council land. And the concept of the joint projects on Maidstone Borough Council land, joint could be one person assisting, it could be a whole group of people assisting, or even councillors themselves being the joint person.
Thank you. Councillor Harwood, do you want to come back?
Just to come back on a point that Mr. Cornwall made. You know, over the years, there's been many projects that I've sought to see progressed on our land where the funding has not existed. We, as a cabinet, have identified a very large pot of money for nature recovery projects. It just seems, it doesn't sit right with me that as you know, we're the funder, yet we are as an organisation almost kind of penalised in taking forward some schemes. I mean, for example, we own lots of woodland, which is sweet chestnut coppice, where you know we converted those back to native tree species and so on, but we wouldn't be able to do it because of the expense. Likewise with conservation grazing, we can't afford the fencing and so on to put in. So that there are projects, and I just would not want to put barriers in the way of our undertaking work on our land, which essentially is the most efficient way of doing it. You know, if we can just working with contractors or working you know, just as a local authority, I think we could do a great deal. You know, I want to see Moat Park full of new wetlands and ponds and beaver and grazing animals and things. But haven't got the money to do it. But we have put aside money, which is pump priming for grants and so on, could help achieve that. And I just think that for want of one word in the entire report, and that's the join in the prospectus, that is the barrier to action. So I think I'd like to move an amendment that we remove the word joint in that first line as changed in the urgent update, because I don't think it needs to be joint.
Thank you. Turn your mic off. Councillor English.
If the word joint is in there, we constrain ourselves. If the word joint is not in there, we can still nevertheless allocate all of the money to other organisations should we choose to do so. We could not, if the word remains in there, decide that a project on Maidstone Borough Council land which does not have a partner could proceed. So we'd be constraining ourselves unnecessarily, and I don't see why we would. I don't think we should pretend that there is masses of money out there sitting in all council budgets for expenditure on our parks and open spaces. I'm struggling, I will get there, but I'm struggling to find the money to do basic footpath repairs in Moat Park. So let's not tell ourselves there's all this masses of money out there. There isn't. So, and so I just think would be making a rod for our own backs, which is not necessary. And I just don't see why we would do it. I think that it would still be possible for us, if we remove the word, to say, oh, £488,000 goes to external partners. We could make that choice. But we could not make the choice in the opposite direction if the word remains. So I second the amendment.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Wales next.
A couple of points strike me. Firstly, the adjudication of the competition for funds. If the council is making applications to this fund, then how will the adjudication be done? Because if there are councillors involved in the panel, they won't be able to be involved in the panel. So that's not particularly transparent, I don't think. And secondly, if these projects are to be delivered by the community, then it's not beyond the wit of the council to find a partner or to find an organisation in the area, Friends of Moat Park or Friends of this or that or the other, to assist to help them spend the money and to apply for the money. I don't think that the council should necessarily be using these funds for its own projects.
Thank you, Councillor Wales. I absolutely agree. I think with you, Councillor Summersgill.
I can just refer to a couple of paragraphs in the document. The 213 on page, I'm not sure I'm on the right page here because I'm reading an old one. The Cabinet Member for Climate Transition and Nature Recovery will have discretionary ability to adapt the tranches and phases of funding release as required based on the volume and types of bids received. And under impartiality, under the risk heading, we have a decision-making board will include an independent representative. So this will provide external assessment and scrutiny to our decision-making to ensure that decisions are on awarding grants are balanced and objective. I think the safeguards are in there.
Thank you. Right. Councillor Harwood, you have spoken a few times on this.
I think it's important to come back because Councillor Wales made a point that this money is almost like some grant money from government or prize money that we have to be careful. We made a decision out of our budget to identify money for nature recovery. And we are currently, as the bidding process sets out, we will give money to other precepting authorities, such as parish councils, to undertake a project on their own, on their land. But we, as the people who provided the money, somehow we need to find a partner when we're progressing something on our land. And I come back to the point that we own and maintain most of the open spaces. And so those people, so essentially those who are in unparished and urban areas, most of our green spaces are Maidstone Council land, and that's where we could do some really appreciable nature recovery things. So I just come back to the point that I think we are fettering Maidstone when it's Maidstone Borough Council's own money, and it just seems like self-harm.
Thank you. Okay, I can take that as your right reply. In terms of the amendments that you've proposed, I suggest we go to a vote on it. Can I see a show of hands for those in favour of amending to remove the word joint? 2, 3, and votes against? 3, 1 abstention, which I think means my casting vote. Yeah. Never wanted to use that. Oh, sorry. So that amendment falls. Are there any other points on the substantive proposal to adopt this prospectus? Was you indicating to speak, Councillor Thompson? Yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I don't wish to tread on any colleague's toes, and I wished I'd thought of this earlier, so my apologies to everybody. However, due to conversations I've had on the doorstep recently, wheels have been turning. Our policy is to prioritise people and planet, and these papers are technical papers that push forward our commitment, and Councillor Harwood has rightly underlined the hard work that we put into and the choices and prioritisation that we've made for our finances. Nevertheless, I'm speaking now in order to inquire whether there is a need either simply to flag further work or to perhaps make an amendment to these papers. I hope not. I note with pleasure on page 85 and 86 the concluding paragraphs that talk about ensuring our due diligence to the way that the monies are spent in an effective manner and towards the successful completion of projects, that they're properly monitored, that there's long-term sustainability, and that there is proper reporting. And those remarks I note are repeated again on pages 97 and 98. What really grabs my attention is on 91 under environmental impact. It says at the top of the page, projects will be assessed based on their potential environmental benefits, including climate resilience, biodiversity, and community impact, which I think resonates not particularly loudly, but correctly with our prioritising of people and planet. As I said, Mr. Chairman, doorstep conversations with residents over the last few days underlined to me that we need to take the public with us. And while we are looking forward, I think, to passing these technical papers about how this prospectus is put out, and we have good faith in its appropriateness, we need to communicate this work to the public, because people are telling me on the doorstep that they don't think that we're doing the right things, and we're using their money to do these things. So I'm asking at this point whether or not we need to make any modification. I hope not. Perhaps it's simply an instruction for our communications as this rolls forward to communicate with the public what it is that we are prioritising this money to, and that they are left in no doubt whatsoever that we're giving them a really clear narrative about how it accomplishes the complicated but meaningful and life-preserving and biodiversity enhancing measures that we say it is. I hope that's clear and useful.
Thank you. I don't think that requires any amendments. I think that is understood, that we must communicate and the desires of this process. Okay. I can't see anyone else indicating, so I suggest we go to the vote on accepting the updated version of the prospectus. Can I see? Are we agreed, or do we need a vote? We need a vote. Okay, can I see all those in favour of accepting the prospectus? 5. Those against? 1 against, and abstentions. Do you want to pop your hand up for the camera? Thank you, Clive. Okay, that's passed. Right. Item 25, flood risk mitigation. Councillor Summersgill.
Thank you. Flood risk mitigation. This item covers, let me just get the right page on here, covers 499. Thank you very much. Yeah. So this covers 4 particular items related to flood risk mitigation. Most of them are updates, really, because some projects are not going on as swiftly as one would hope. We are intending to.
Councillor Summersgill, can I? We've just lost 2 cabinet members to go to the loo, I think. So maybe if we adjourn for 5 minutes and then carry on and start them again. Otherwise, they're not going to hear your wonderful instruction. Okay, so adjourn for 5 minutes. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. The webcast has restarted, so I think we can restart the meeting. Hopefully everyone's had a chance for a loo break. Councillor Summerskill, do you want to start again on item 25, please?
Thank you very much. Yeah. So these items, 4 items here on flood risk mitigation, which as a local flood warden in my area and a water and soil engineer are right up my street. A couple of projects that are have been already approved and ongoing, and then a couple of notes that things that may come in the future. We agreed a project July 2024 about with South East Rivers Trust to design and implement natural flood management in the Belt catchment, focusing on the River Sherway, which drains into Headcorn, and Upper Medway Internal Drainage Board and match funding that project. Progress has been slower than we'd have liked. We found it difficult to get engagement from landowners in the area, but we have 5 now identified, and we are looking at drawing up a memorandum of understanding so that we can design the works that will be carried out on that land. We may need to include other parts of Maidstone Borough Council's land in the catchment, probably in the Len catchment, and see if we can do natural flood management there. The second one is the Medway Street flood barrier, which has recently been hit in the news and has been going on with a very long history as described in the report. This requires KCC approval, as the flood barrier would be built on highways land, and the current position is that KCC are withholding consent for the scheme, and officers have spent considerable time and effort dealing with the KCC queries, which we were under the impression have been resolved, but the leader has pressed KCC for action and tried to get a meeting to discuss the matter forward. I don't know if there's any update to give on that later on, but we have all the funding in place and the scheme is all ready to go. We just need permission from KCC to do that. The upcoming schemes, back in Headcorn again, Environment Agency is looking at delivering property flood management in some vulnerable properties in Headcorn. This is similar to a scheme that's been already delivered in Yalding, Collier Street and Hunton in 2019. And they think up to 98 homes are identified as being a very significant risk of flooding in the Headcorn area. The EA is simply asking for MBC's in principle support for this scheme, where they think there may be a potential budget gap of £62,000. And if that is requested, this will be brought to members at the appropriate time. But central government funding relies on them identifying how many houses they wish to put the PFR in. So we won't know on that one. And the fourth and final one is community flood resilience, where we're supporting parish councils in building up their own flood risk response and capabilities, and note in the report the details that's progressing with that.
Thank you, Councillor Summerskill. Any comments? Councillor Harwood.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I actually find this report quite depressing in that we had found resources for nature-based solutions holding the floodwater back, and it has foundered. And as somebody who has spent more time than they'd hope up to their middle in floodwater and sewage over too many years, I think it's really depressing that we are not undertaking the action that we need to keep the water back in the countryside and in the landscape. Instead, we're rushing it off into our watercourses, so they just end up as conduits, flooding the nearest communities, and not putting our money into nature-based solutions in the wider landscape and putting it into hard engineering methods around air bricks and flood doors and so on seems like something of an admission of defeat. But we are not the masters and mistresses of our own destiny in this respect. The Environment Agency and landowners have the larger part to play in this. So I'm prepared to go along with this motion, but I hope that in future we can act in a more progressive way around keeping floodwater, slowing down the flow of floodwater, rather than trying to deal with the aftermath of flooding events, often not all too successfully. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood. I'll just draw your attention to paragraph 2.7 that does say that there is exactly that sort of nature-based solution now progressing. It's been taken, it's been a bit slow, and the initial landowners clearly were reluctant, but they have found 5 landowners now. So part of that holding back the floodwaters is going to happen. But as you take your comments, Councillor English.
I think it is important that we continue to try and progress the nature-based solutions, because those are the ones that will have the long-term wider effect. It's good that we haven't given up on this despite the difficulties, and we must persevere because it is very important. I mean, the other solutions are what they are, and I wouldn't say that they're not, you know, that they are valueless. They're not, but they have purpose. But the more natural solutions are the ones that will, if adopted widely, are the ones that will have the longer term effect and will mitigate the effect earlier on in the cycle, and that is quite important. Closing the stable door after the donkey has exited is probably still the right thing to do, but it doesn't solve the problem. So, you know, but we are continuing to persevere, and we mustn't give up just because the better solutions are difficult. But it doesn't seem that we haven't given up, so that's good.
Thank you. I fully, wholeheartedly agree. Okay, I can't see anyone else indicating. Councillor Summerskill, you've proposed option 1. I'm happy to second that from the chair. Are we agreed? Can I just Dave said yes. Has everybody agreed? Excellent. Thank you. Okay. Item 26 then, Q1 finance update report. Councillor Wells has kindly agreed to support the corporate resources portfolio, and hopefully you're going to introduce this one.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. This is a bit of deja vu for me, taking me back about 15 years, back to resources. So, the Q1 financial update report. The table on page 1111 in the body of the report has the headline figures, which show a year-end forecast variance currently of a deficit of £26,000, which is less than 1.1 of the overall net budget, so I don't think we need to worry too much about that. There is, as you see, quite a variation between different PAC areas. The significant variances are explained on pages 121 onwards, and I'll leave colleagues to speak particularly about their own areas if they wish. But on the housing ones, I'll put my other hat on. The deficits there are the ones well known, well documented, well catalogued on homeless temporary accommodation, which is going down slightly because of the properties we are acquiring in our portfolio to house people in temporary accommodation. The homelessness prevention is running ahead of budget and is likely to remain ahead of budget by the end of the year. And the final one there is Granada House, which has been transferred from Maidstone Property Holdings to the general fund for use as temporary accommodation. So this will lead to lower projected income, but benefits elsewhere from avoiding nightly paid accommodation costs. That's the revenue side. On the capital, you've got page 124 has the table with, again, a large underspend of capital on the housing and community cohesion budget, not as large as the climate transition and corporate environmental services. A lot of these capital budget shortfalls are timing issues, variances over ambitious delivery schedules and things like that. Part of the underspend on the Quality Homes for Life is that some of the things that were in the budget are coming in at less than budget. So we're making savings, particularly in, as I understand it, on the Maidstone House project. Then, as I say, the various variances are explained on page 125 onwards. On page 130 is the summary of the Treasury Management function, and officers confirming that the approved prudential and Treasury indicator limits within the Treasury Management Strategy Statement have been complied with during the quarter, so that's good news. The report also requests Cabinet's approval for the write-off of 3 irrecoverable debts for rent outstanding. Due diligence is carried out to make sure, as far as possible, that potential tenants are creditworthy, and debt write-offs as a proportion of total net corporate property rental income of some 3 million. So these 3 write-offs remain quite a small fraction of that. So colleagues are asked to A, recommend the write-offs of the uncollectibles, and B, to note the report.
Councillor Wells, I'm happy to second that proposal. Are there any comments from Cabinet members? So quite a long airing at PAC and overview and scrutiny. Nobody's indicating. So are we happy to agree the proposals? Agreed, thank you. Item 27, annual performance report. I think this is for me to forward. Page we on 132. Not going to say a huge amount. This is. Oh, is it you? Is it you to do it? I thought it was me. Oh, Councillor Wales, over to you. Apologies.
Well, I can give you the briefing notes if you want. So the background to this is performance management is a vital mechanism for ensuring that Maidstone Borough Council delivers on its strategic priorities. And it helps identify areas requiring improvement, ensures services provide value for money, and supports positive outcomes for residents. So this report sets out the performance position against our 2024-25 key performance indicators. And this was the final year of the Council's previous strategic plan set under the previous administration, and therefore the KPIs were aligned to meet the priority areas of this plan. New KPIs were set in March this year for 25-26 and aligned to the current administration's corporate plan, 2025-35. In addition to this report, there's a KPI dashboard on the Council's website, and this dashboard is refreshed monthly, where there is monthly data, which allows members of the public and members of the Council to view our performance position more frequently. The report covers 77 KPIs grouped under the Council's strategic priority areas as follows. Embracing growth and enabling infrastructure has 15 KPIs. A thriving place has 13. Safe, clean and green has 18 KPIs. Homes and communities has 18 as well. And additional measures has 13. Of these, 43 KPIs were for information only. And this is to just to inform the sort of background to some of the data, but they don't have targets. It's really just for noting because it's not necessarily things which the Council can influence. Among the KPIs with targets, 65% met their targets, 12% missed their targets but remained within a 10% tolerance, and 23% missed their targets by more than 10%. Compared to the previous year, 43% of KPIs showed improvement, but 49 showed a decline in performance and 8% remained unchanged. So you're recommended to note the performance position at the end of 24-25, but also including the actions taken or being proposed to improve these positions. And any other members who can request any additional recommendations to further analyse or improve performance, which the Cabinet finds to be appropriate.
Thank you, Councillor Wells. There was a suggestion from PAC, or was it from overview and scrutiny? I can't remember. The PAC. around an action plan to increase the supply of electric vehicle charging points. Just wondered, Councillor Summerskill, as I think EV charging points might be in your climate action plan. Do you feel that we need to have a separate action plan around this, or are you content that you have it covered and would be prepared to share with members of the PAC what that plan is?
I think we can produce one, no problem. It's just dependent on whether KCC are going to continue funding the posts that we expect to come in. So it won't be a very quick thing. It's certainly nothing that we can do very quickly.
Are you I'm assuming you're not proposing a full action plan, but a statement of some description? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, a progress note.
Okay. Mr. Cornell.
Yeah, just on that, you know, it is a KCC scheme that across the county that we're sort of engaging with, so we don't have a direct delivery program of charges other than what we've done at our sites that we own and our car park estate. So our sort of sphere of influence is quite limited, but I think, you know, just an update note would be appropriate because it's working with a external partner. That would be my view.
Thank you. So I think what I'm hearing is there's an acceptance we can provide something for the PAC in terms of their request, but obviously not a full action plan. Councillor Summerskill.
Just a note from that discussion in the PAC, I undertook to try and get information on the parishes that put EVs in on their own land as well to add to that figure, which is something I'm involving the Parish Council Environment Network in their meeting next week. So there is that to feed in.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments on the performance report? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chairman. Looking at the Healthier, Stronger Communities portfolio, KPI returns on, I think it's page 17 of the document within our documents 155 on the pages. I would simply like to reinforce, if you would allow, my gratitude to officers and our partners for some of the spectacular results shown on this page. The 24-25 target for footfall at the Maidstone Museum was exceeded by 17,500, a very significant number. I regret that there was no target set for footfall at the second most significant collection of carriages on the planet, namely in Maidstone. It is a healthy 2,138 at the moment, and I look forward to seeing in our partnership with Amy Bracey that number rocketing yet further as we look to enhance that. There's lots of other good news on this paper, but to reinforce my thanks to officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I think it's a very good point, and I suspect the entire Cabinet will wish to thank officers for the hard work that you do in delivering priorities. So thank you. Councillor Harwood.
Thank you, Chair. Just one point. I took a look at looking at the indicator for trees planted. I've taken a look at a few of the plots that were planted last winter season, and the very dry summer has led to a failure rate which is extraordinarily high in some sites, particularly on the green sand, on sand and on sites that were previously tips. Dare I say, it's not about how many you plant, it's how well you plant them. And it's been proven with different planting approaches with good soil preparation, such as the Miyawaki sites, where you get a very significant survival rate, whereas in conventional planting, you're getting more failures than survival. So I think it's just really a note on this, but you know, I don't think we should congratulate ourselves too quickly on how much carbon this is absorbing, because most of them are probably dead. But anyway, on that note, well done, everyone.
Yes, so thank you for making a happy evening, Councillor Harwood. Your point is well made. I was at Cornwallis Park a couple of days ago, and there is quite a stark difference in the growth in those different approaches. Okay, Councillor Wales.
Just to pick up on that, of course, there's a qualitative as well as a quantitative issue here, but any representation of data has to be quantitative. We have to make sure that the procedures around that ensure that that quantum survives rather than peters out and dies.
Thank you. Okay, this report is for noting. Do we note it? Excellent, good. So item 28, over the page, is the property disposal policy. Now it says me to, is this for me to introduce? No, it's for Councillor Wales, because my notes I told Olivia not to update them because I know exactly who was doing what and I've completely mushed my brain. So Councillor Wales, talk to us about it.
I thought we cleared that the only resources bit you were doing was the paddle courts, but don't paddle off into other areas. So the property disposal policy. Now this has the report before us does include the changes that the PAC recommended. So the background is it's always good practice to review policies such as this from time to time. It's particularly appropriate to review the property disposal policy, given that the council may need to consider proposals from members and third parties that are prompted by plans for local government reorganisation. The updated policy broadly follows the approach taken in the existing policy. However, 2 new criteria have been added for appraising property disposals. One is contribution to protecting and enhancing the natural, built and historic environment, including contribution to biodiversity. And secondly, future arrangements for securing maintenance and sustainability of property. These criteria are both intended to provide assurance as to the future of the assets being disposed of and would be relevant in the case of transfers to, for example, town or parish councils. Each individual property disposal will continue to be the subject of a separate decision to be made in accordance with the consultation. So the recommendation is that we adopt the proposed new policy as outlined in the paper, as amended by the discussion at the PAC.
Thank you. And Councillor Clark, desperately trying to reach into my mushy brain to think of your surname for a second. You'd like to speak on this?
Thank you, Chairman. So I spoke at the PAC, and really it was my emphasis was on the fact that I didn't feel that the policy really reflected what we were doing in terms of moving towards devolution. It's natural to consider that Maidstone should hold on to the freeholds and just give out leaseholds in a historical sense, because obviously when something is owned by Maidstone, members can ensure that something is protected. But we've got a big change coming up, and we have an opportunity to look at local groups that are currently managing leaseholds and whether or not they might be the most suitable groups to actually take on the freeholds, rather than Maidstone dissolving and that freehold being moved up to a unitary, and it might potentially be, you know, a group of people in Sevenoaks that decide what happens with a community asset. So that's really the background. I want to give you an example because it came up on Monday at a parish council meeting back in around about 2016, 2017. The government was trying to have councils look at underutilised assets that community groups were currently managing, with a view to disposing of the freeholds to those community groups, and therefore volunteers would take away the costs that the council was incurring. Richmond Way Green was one of those, and we were working with the property group at that time with a view to the freehold moving across to the North Lewes Residents Association. Subsequently, they've become part of Lewes Parish, and they still control that area. However, there was a staff change during that process, and the emphasis changed from transferring the freehold to a leasehold. and there was a section of the land that was pulled out because there was a housing development that was going through planning nearby. So a strip of the land was held out of the lease. The rest of it was a long-term lease. The housing application was approved without the need for taking any of the park away. So we're now in a situation where you've got Lewes Parish Council, they've got a long-term lease. There's a section of it which is still a freehold of Maidstone Borough Council. It's not in that lease, and we're moving towards unitary that probably won't know anything about why there's a strip of land that they're taking on. There's nothing more that Maidstone could monetize at that site because as I say, the only land that could have been opened has already got planning permission with approval without needing that strip of land. And Lewes have indicated that they would like to take on the freehold of the overall site. The way the policy was written, I felt that that really was kind of counter to the policy. And I spoke to Mark Green ahead of the pack to sort of run this by him, and he even confirmed that as it's written, a transfer of that freehold would not be policy compliant. But obviously we hadn't adopted the policy at that point, and that's why I spoke at the pack to make sure that we do consider this. A lot is going on, a lot is changing. I think we've got to sort of change the way we look at things. Linton Parish are also talking about some of the assets that they lease and whether or not they should be considering taking on freehold. So it affects all members. So I just, in your deliberations, I hope you feel that the way this has been implemented will be robust to allow that type of that type of transfer going forward. I'm just trying to see if there was anything else that I was missing. I'll leave it at that. I think I've made the point. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I do hope you. We've obviously updated the policy since the PAC discussion to include that possibility around freehold. Clive.
Yeah, I think I'm looking at the wording on page 192. I think that's the updated wording of the new clause. I think this is sensible because there are there's lots of pieces of land of various sizes. Frankly, a vast amount of them are of no great monetary value to the Borough Council, and will be of even less monetary value to the Borough Council in a couple of years' time for various reasons. So I think this is definitely the right way to go. And to be honest, it would have been helpful if we'd been there a few years ago, but we are there now. And I think this is the right approach and gives us the opportunity to work with not just parish councils, but other potential organisations, trusts and so on that exist out there in the wider community. So hopefully that's the new clause has addressed the concerns of the Lewes and Linton Ward and Tovel Ward councillors.
Excellent. So we have. I'll take that as a second to Councillor Wales' proposal. Can't see anyone else indicating to speak. So I assume the motion is to adopt the policy. Are we agreed? Excellent. Thank you. To Councillor Wales, hopefully you're down for item 29 as well. Excellent. And 30. Oh.
Sorry, this man keeps turning it off. This item sets out the details of a proposed property disposal. It illustrates one of the situations outlined in the report we've just discussed on property disposal policy, where it is appropriate for the council to dispose of property. In this case, the reason is to support the delivery of the local plan review 2024 and to enable the delivery of new homes. Use of the council's land was envisaged in the relevant local plan policy, and provisional agreement has been reached with the relevant developer. The consideration due to the council has been carried out by an external valuer and is believed that it represents best value. There's been a bit of discussion about this, but I think we've come to the right decision on that. Members are asked to agree to dispose of the land described in the exempt appendices, to delegate authority to the Director of Finance and Resources to conclude negotiations with the purchaser, and to delegate authority to the Director of Finance and Resources to instruct solicitors to negotiate and complete all necessary agreements and deeds arising from or ancillary to the disposal. And this is not just between us and the developer, but with the other organisation involved in the area, which might have an interest in this land disposal, being the nature reserve. It's gone. It's a whispering going.
Well, thank you. There's a fourth recommendation as well that's come forward, I think, which is that the Director of Finance and Resources raises the committee's points discussed in the closed section with the Director of Regeneration and Place before the land is disposed, which is why I was a bit quiet, because I couldn't quite get my head around what that meant, but I think I understand it now. Okay, sorry, apologies. So it's the fourth recommendation is the Director of Finance and Resources raises the committee's points discussed in the closed section with the Director of Regeneration and Place before the land is disposed. Yeah, well, I think it means that they want a discussion about points raised in closed session, which I don't think is particularly material to the paper, but it's a recommendation from officers. Mrs. Broom.
So just to update members, and I don't think this is a part two, what I'm going to tell you is part two. Some concerns were raised about the development that may occur to which our land disposal relates. All of that, all the issues that were raised as concerns are captured by the provisions in the policy for that land allocation that is in the local plan review. So, so that's the first point to make. The second is that the concerns raised we should not seek to deal with those through a land transaction. They should be dealt with through the proper planning process. So far as the PAC committee's recommendation that dialogue should occur, it's already occurred, but in a slightly different way from the way in which the PAC envisaged. And the reason for that is that the Director for Finance and Resources went on leave directly after the PAC meeting. And therefore, because I was also present at that meeting, I checked personally the LPR provisions and therefore unable to advise you directly.
Okay, Councillor Summerskill, you're indicating.
Thank you. Without going into part two, I just note there is a provision for some cost sharing for paperwork permits. Is that, and we've just approved under Appendix 2.4.5, all costs associated with disposal, including valuations and legal fees, will be borne by the transferee unless there are exceptional circumstances that require a different approach. Are these exceptional circumstances that require a different approach?
Yeah, we have to defer to officers. I don't know if we've got an answer.
So some specific and separate negotiations have been necessary for this particular transaction. And so I think the answer to your question is yes.
Yeah. Can't see anyone else indicating. So Councillor Wells has proposed. I'm happy to second from the chair. Are we agreed? Excellent. Item 30, property acquisition. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Chair. So after a disposal, we're now on to an acquisition for the Council House building programme. This item relates to the redevelopment of a site already owned by NBC and the acquisition of 2 neighbouring properties to deliver a block of flats with 26 homes. The site is within walking distance of town centre shops and services, as well as public transport networks. The existing building owned by NBC is currently used for temporary accommodation and has been for over 10 years. It no longer meets requirements and requires significant investment. And this redevelopment proposal is therefore being brought forward as a more viable option. The site does not currently have planning permission, but the council will make the planning application once approvals and due diligence have been confirmed and following design development. The purchase of the neighbouring 2 properties is subject to planning being achieved, and contracts with these 2 neighbouring properties will be entered into prior to submission of the planning application. This report covers the acquisition and redevelopment of a 26-flat block delivering 15 one-bed and 11 two-bed homes. The housing team has provided data suggesting the need for 1 and 2 bed units in the town centre, which this scheme will go some way to provide. The plan also proposes increased in planting proposed to the front of the site, which will much improve the street scene and approach into Maidstone town centre. This improvement allows a provisional scope of 17 car parking spaces, which is deemed an acceptable compromise by the local planning authority. Electric vehicle charging facilities and secure cycle storage will be incorporated into the development design. Homes England grant funding will be applied for post-acquisition to assist in the cost of delivering these units as affordable homes, or depending on how much money we get as for social rent. This proposed acquisition and redevelopment provides Maidstone Borough Council with a good opportunity, which will go some way to improve the accommodation provision in this area, which has already seen some redevelopment. The acquisition supports the affordable homes development strategy, and I commend it to Cabinet.
Councillor Wells, I'm happy to second that. Would any members like to speak on it? No? Okay, then I suggest, is that agreed in terms of option 2? Is that agreed? Thank you. Excellent. Right. I think that's the end of the agenda. It's only 8:30. Look at that. Thank you, everyone. Meeting's over.